miles above the Pacific Ocean, about to head over parts of South America. And there you see Dragon during its final couple of hours attached to the International Space Station there on the space station's Harmony node. There on the far left-hand side is the European Columbus Laboratory. Just out of view is the Japanese Kibo Laboratory, and there at the bottom right-hand side is the U.S. Destiny Laboratory with the space station's solar arrays back there in the background. As we mentioned, the bolts are being released in between Dragon and the International Space Station. The next major step will be to begin the process of backing Dragon away from the orbiting complex. That is going to be done via ground command. It's a little bit different than what was done back the early part of this month whenever Dragon arrived at the station. The crew was at the controls for the majority of all the different arm operations that were done, but the ground teams here in Houston are going to be sending the command to automatically move the station's 58-foot-long robotic arm that is currently already attached to Dragon to back the spacecraft away from the orbiting complex, and then the crew will take over at that point in time. The go for release of Dragon should take place around 8:21 a.m. Central Time, a little more than 2 hours from now. At that point, Dragon will be released. It'll be flying by itself. It will conduct the first of its planned back-away maneuvers, firing its jets 1 minute later. And then there'll be a series of burns that will take place soon after that will take Dragon away from the space station complex. It'll cross out of what's called the keep-out sphere, which is an imaginary circle drawn around the station that spacecraft must keep away from. And then it will cross what's known as the approach ellipsoid, which is a wider circle, soon after that as well. And then Dragon will be on its way. That first departure burn should take place at 8:27. The second departure burn a couple of minutes later at 8:29. Dragon will have what's known as a yaw maneuver. It'll spin around basically at 8:35. It'll have another departure burn at 8:36. It'll cross that imaginary circle that we call the keep-out sphere at 8:36 as well. And then it'll cross the approach ellipsoid at 8:39. So all of this, once Dragon gets released, happens fairly rapidly. Dragon's deorbit burn is scheduled for today at 1:28 p.m. Central Time. That is 11:28 a.m. in California. The trunk that you see there at the bottom that has the solar arrays attached to it will be jettisoned at 1:41. Entry interface for Dragon will take place at 1:43. Its drogue chutes will be deployed at 2:11. The main chutes a minute later at 2:12. And then Dragon is currently scheduled to splash down about 250 miles off the coast of California at 2:20 later on today. Now, note about our programming here on NASA television. We will not have live coverage of Dragon's re-entry and splashdown today due to the fact that we don't have any video assets in the air that are tracking the spacecraft. So confirmation of Dragon's successful deorbit burn and its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean will be provided by SpaceX as they watch over their spacecraft as it comes back in. Updates will be available on the SpaceX website at spacex.com and also on the NASA website at www.nasa.gov and nasa.gov/station. So pay attention to those two websites for confirmation of this afternoon's activities. But we'll stay with you today until Dragon departs the space station until we don't see it any longer. We should have some pretty good views of the spacecraft as it backs away and continues on toward its re-entry later on today. There's a live look inside SpaceX's Mission Control Center there in Hawthorne, California. Obviously a very busy day for this team there, and quite a milestone for this team as they watch this end of the first commercial resupply mission that this company has flown. Of course, they've had test flights before, including one back in May up to the International Space Station, but this is the first one that was done under the Commercial Resupply Services contract. So SpaceX now officially joins the other cargo providers up to the International Space Station. The Russians have their Progress vehicle that fly up to the station several times a year, the next one coming up on October 31st. The Japanese have their HTV spacecraft that flies basically once a year, docks to the same place that SpaceX's Dragon is currently attached to, the bottom side of Harmony. And the Europeans have their automated transfer vehicle that flies up several tons of supplies and rendezvous and docks with the Russian segment of the International Space Station, and now the first commercial company, SpaceX, providing missions as well.
Thanks for the tag up, Sonny.
And confirmation from both the crew and the ground teams here that all of the bolts on the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station have been loosened. The crew's been working this since before we came on the air this morning, watching over the systems as these bolts are automatically driven by ground teams. They had quite a bit of last-minute packing to do. That was done on Saturday. There's a lot of what they call cold bags inside Dragon. One of the biggest things that Dragon gives NASA and its international partners is the ability to return cargo back to Earth. In some ways, that is almost more important than the actual delivery of the cargo, because SpaceX is the only vehicle that can return a significant amount of cargo and scientific research back to Earth. Of course, this orbiting laboratory is a huge research facility, and getting these samples back to Earth so that the different scientists and researchers can take a look at them is of critical importance. We've not had this capability since the retirement of the space shuttles last year, so there's quite a number of samples on board Dragon that are getting ready to come back home later on today. There's a look at Aki Hoshide and Sonny Williams. Yesterday, as they were finishing up some of the final packing of Dragon, you get a sense of the inside of that spacecraft. You see all the different cargo strapped down there. There is some frozen samples that are put inside a glacier. Glacier is basically a big footlocker that is powered up and is kept at a very cold temperature. All those frozen samples are stored in there, and that is going to be part of the early destow cargo that's going to take place. They're actually going to remove that glacier and some of the other supplies right after Dragon splashes down. So that'll be removed, kept in sort of a powered container, and brought on a fast boat back to the docks where SpaceX's Dragon will ultimately come, but the cargo is going to come back a little bit before the spacecraft. The remainder of the cargo that's inside Dragon will actually come back inside the cargo craft itself. Once Dragon gets back to the docks there near Long Beach, California, they'll do some stabilization of the spacecraft, and then it's going to be trucked to McGregor, Texas, which is where SpaceX has a facility. And then the spacecraft will be processed there, as well as the remainder of the cargo that was not returned early. Again, this is some footage from yesterday as Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshide packed some final items inside the Dragon spacecraft. This is before they shut the hatches. But they spent the better part of their morning packing this spacecraft full of the remainder of the items that are coming home. Dragon took up 882 pounds of supplies. The crew made quick work of removing all of that soon after Dragon docked with the space station. It's actually taking home about twice that amount of supplies. It's bringing home 1,673 pounds of cargo, including 163 pounds of crew supplies, 866 pounds of scientific research, the final portions of which Sonny and Aki were packing there, as you see from the video from yesterday, and 518 pounds of hardware. So close to a ton of supplies coming home later on today back to Earth. They exited Dragon around 10:15 a.m. Central Time yesterday. This was Saturday, and then they closed the hatches at about 11 a.m. Central Time. And they have spent the time since then and in the early part of today finishing up what they call a vestibule configuration. That is basically just the common area in between Dragon and the space station. They depressurized that so that the hatches once they were closed, they could take care of that and also begin the process of actually demating Dragon and undoing these bolts, which they just wrapped up a few minutes ago. That is a look at Brazil from 263 miles above. This team here in Houston is continuing to monitor the progress as the Dragon team in Hawthorne, California works through all these procedures, getting ready for the actual demating of Dragon from the space station coming up here after the 8 o'clock hour, so about another 2 hours from now. It's been a very busy time for the International Space Station with the arrival of Dragon and all the work their crew had to do. There's a brand new set of crew members up on board with Kevin Ford, Evgeny Tarelkin, and Oleg Novitsky arriving this week. Of course, they've got the activity today. The Progress 49 is going to be heading up to the space station at the end of the month on October 31st. As we speak and as we bring you this coverage live on the air, that rocket is being mated down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. It's going to roll out tomorrow, head out to what is known as Site 1. That is the typical launch pad for both Progress and Soyuz vehicles. And it will be bringing up about 2.5 tons of supplies to the International Space Station. Then there's a spacewalk coming up 1 day later on November 1st, where Sonny Williams and Ike Hoshide will venture outside to the P6, that is the port or left-hand side of the space station. These big solar panels that you see there on the far right-hand side have radiators that are very close to them that ammonia is flowed through to keep all the different systems cool and in proper working order. There's always been a small leak on one of those radiators, the P6 radiator as it is known. But that leak rate has sort of increased as of late. So Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshide are going to go out there and deploy a spare radiator that has not been used since the early part of the station's life. But there is a spare radiator there that is going to be deployed, and they're sort of going to shunt those ammonia lines and reroute it through that spare radiator to see if that fixes the leak. So quite a bit of traffic going to and from the station. The Dragon's about to head home today. And then, of course, that spacewalk coming up on November 1st. We'll have live coverage of that spacewalk that we just talked about beginning at 6:15 a.m. Central Time on the 1st, 7:15 a.m. Eastern Time. The spacewalk itself is due to begin about an hour later at 7:15 a.m. Central Time. If you missed our briefing on Friday, where Mike Suffredini and Mike Lammers and Allison Bollinger talked about that spacewalk, you can always log on to the NASA website and also the NASA television YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/NASA television, and watch that briefing there and hear them describe the steps that Sonny and Aki are going to be taking later on this week.
You can normalize station ground 2.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll take care of it.
In addition to the 6 members of Expedition 33 that are currently on board the space station, there's been quite a number of other guests coming and going from the space station. Here's a look at some of the spiders on board, which is one of the more unusual experiments that are part of this flight. They're going to be coming home later on today aboard Dragon, so these spiders are getting a free ride home aboard SpaceX's spacecraft. As a piece of trivia, there were some fish that were flown up as well on the Soyuz TMA-06M that took up Nowitzki and Tarelkin and Ford earlier this week. The actual aquatic habitat that those fish are going to be living in was flown actually on SpaceX's spacecraft, and then the fish, these Medaka fish, which look like small guppies, were flown. I think there's about 32 of them, were flown up on the Soyuz with the crew earlier this week. So not only does the crew get a new home, but the fish do as well. They're going to be studying how these fish behave in space, how their bodies react, and what the effects of no gravity have on those fish. Of course, there are correlations and extrapolations that can be done between how those fish and other animals and insects react to space and how we do. So they're going to be studying those and hopefully learning quite a bit about it. Here's a look at the current complement of Expedition 33. There's Sunny Williams on the far left-hand side. She is the commander. She has been on board the station with Yuri Malenchenko, the far left-hand side, as well as Aki Hoshide since July. That is going to be coming home in the middle of November, landing in Kazakhstan. And then on the far right-hand side, you've got Kevin Ford, who just flew up there with Oleg Nowitzki and Evgeny Tarelkin. They're standing beside him. That crew will be on board until March. Kevin Ford is actually going to become the commander of Expedition 34 once Sunny and Aki and Yuri come home. Once they undock, that actually signals the end of Expedition 33 and the beginning of Expedition 34 under the command of Ford. But those 3 newest crew members, Ford, Nowitzki, and Tarelkin, have been working to get used to their surroundings. That has safety briefing with Sunny and the rest of the crew soon after they got on board. And they're going to spend quite a bit of time in the upcoming week getting some orientation done. This is the first flight for Nowitzki and Tarelkin. Kevin Ford flew as the pilot of STS-128, but this is the first time that he's actually lived on board the space station for an extended period of time.
The Node 2 Nader hatch window, we have the camera also routed there in case you want it. We see daylight between ourselves and the Dragon.
Thanks for sharing, and I'm not sure if Robo needs all the views they're using right now, but we appreciate your letting us know, Sonny.
We're recording it. We'll set it down afterwards if you want it.
I'm sure we'd all like to watch it. Thank you.
As you can see, Dragon has begun the process of being backed away from the International Space Station. Again, this is a ground-commanded maneuver. The robotics team here inside Mission Control is actually sending the commands to the station's 58-foot long. The crew, of course, is watching over this, but this is an automatic process and pre-programmed choreography to move this spacecraft back away from the station. But there you see the gap in between the Harmony node, which has been the home of Dragon for about 18 days. Our official Unberthing time for the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft is 6:19 a.m. Central Time, 7:19 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, the vehicle being backed away from the International Space Station. The payloads teams are reporting that they're seeing good data on the glacier. That is that freezer that has laboratory samples inside Dragon. They're going to monitor that through the majority of these operations to make sure that all the samples are staying basically cold. And they're seeing good data from that, which of course is good news. But there you get a good look of the station's robotic arm, 58 feet long, currently mounted to the Harmony node, and grappled the Dragon is slowly backing it away. There on the far right-hand side is the Japanese Kibo laboratory. Back there on the left-hand side is the U.S. Destiny laboratory. That's the western coast of Africa approaching underneath the International Space Station and SpaceX's Dragon. Altitude 263 miles. Are about to pass directly above Dakar, which, as a piece of trivia, actually used to be one of the shuttle's landing sites, transatlantic landing sites, back in the 1980s. The robotics team here in Mission Control has confirmed that Dragon's 150 centimeters away from the International Space Station. They're going to hold here while they rotate some solar arrays. It's a very methodical process to back the spacecraft away from the space station. Again, the majority of these commands that are being sent to both the space station arm and Dragon are being done from the ground. But the crew is watching over this in both the Harmony node, and soon they'll be going down to the cupola and taking a look out the windows at this spacecraft as they get ready to release it, coming up around 8:26 a.m. Central Time. And Dragon solar arrays being rotated around, being sent via command from Hawthorne, California. These two vehicles are currently 264 miles above Africa, right above Mauritania, heading up over Algeria. They'll be crossing over parts of the Mediterranean and then over almost directly above Rome here in just a few minutes.
I'm still stationed on 2.
Go ahead, Sonny. We're here.
Good morning. I'm just wondering if I could jump into the nanoracks a little earlier than planned. I see it's not blue box.
And Sonny, we're taking a look. Station Huntsville and Space to Ground 2 for nanoracks.
Go ahead.
Sonny, the NanoRex PD is on console, and we are ready to support you if you want to go ahead and get started with that activity.
Okay, we'll do that. And also just a question for Kevin. He was wondering if he could get the Elite setup going. Do you need to see the setup process, or are you good with the final configuration for setup?
And Sonny, we will want to be able to see that setup. We need to take a look at that Node 2 camera to verify it before we get into the protocols.
Okay, copy that.
As these two vehicles pass over parts of northern Africa heading up over the Mediterranean, here's a look at the timeline again for today. The release is going to take place at 8:26 a.m. Central Time. Dragon will have a departure burn 1 minute later at 8:27, and then another one 2 minutes later at 8:29 a.m. Central Time. It'll have a yaw maneuver basically spinning around, which is the reverse of what it did coming up to the station at 8:35. It'll have a third departure burn at 8:36. It'll exit the keep-out sphere at that point in time. And then by 8:54, it'll be more than 6 kilometers away from the space station. That should be about the time when we lose our views of Dragon. And that'll be when we'll end our coverage here on NASA television. Again, we're not going to have coverage of the splashdown live here on NASA TV. You'll have to visit nasa.gov/station and spacex.com to get confirmation of that.
Go ahead, Hansel, for Elite.
Yes, sir.
The Dragon also has a burn to reduce its apogee, which is the highest point of its orbit, at 9:22. That begins the process of setting up for the deorbit burn. That deorbit burn will take place at 1:28 p.m. Central Time.
To wait until
the trunk will be jettisoned. That is the bottom half of the spacecraft at 1:41
Your preference,
p.m.
my preference,
Central.
no problem at all.
Entry interface is about 2 minutes later at 1:43.
And thought maybe I'd get some things up.
Dragon's drogue chutes will be deployed at 2:11, and then the main chutes will be deployed at 2:12. And splashdown will be at 2:20, thereabouts.
Thanks for asking. And
250 miles off the coast of Baja California. And it'll be 3:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, for confirmation of the deorbit burn and splashdown, just log on to either SpaceX.com or www.nasa.gov/station. We'll have the updates there for you. But for now, we'll continue to watch as Dragon has been successfully unberthed and detached from the International Space Station. That took place at 6:19 a.m. Central Time, 7:19 a.m. Eastern. The ground teams here in Houston are continuing to work through the process to get it set up and in position for the actual release of Dragon. The crew will be doing that part of the maneuver. Aki Hoshide will be the primary robotic arm operator, with Sonny Williams backing him up. But there's a look eye to eye with Dragon as it continues to be backed away from the orbiting complex. These two spacecraft are now passing high above Russia at an altitude of 265 miles. We're about to lose our views here in just a few seconds, but we'll pick them back up a little bit from now. But Dragon is continuing to be backed away from the orbiting complex very slowly. This is a ground command that is being sent from here in Houston. The spacecraft is currently on the end of the space station's 58-foot-long robotic arm and is basically on its way to the release point. Again, that release coming up at 8:26 a.m. Central Time today. This team here in Mission Control continuing to watch over the International Space Station and listen in as the SpaceX team in Hawthorne, California monitors their vehicle. These teams have worked very close to one another for the last 2.5 weeks during these joint operations. These teams did have a chance to pass along some congratulations to Sonny and the rest of the crew during yesterday's DPC, that is the Daily Planning Conference. We're going to take a listen to that now.
Houston Station, Space to Ground 2. How about if we do the DPC on Space to Ground 2? And if you're ready for that, we are ready.
And Sunny, that's perfect. We are ready for the evening DPC, and we just want to say thank you so much for all the great work you've done today. Your teamwork and your puzzle skills were certainly put to the test, but the final result is a successful closeout of the Dragon. And that SpaceX team would really like for me to pass on their sincerest thanks for a job well done, not just today, but throughout their entire mission. They're looking forward to seeing Dragon come home and wish you the best in tomorrow's undock activities.
Wow, thanks. It was a pleasure for us to work with the Dragon team in Hawthorne, as well as the Dragon team in Houston, and of course all the payloads that are associated with that from Huntsville, and all our partners and all the science that's coming back home. It's a nice change from loading vehicles with trash to actually loading vehicles with stuff that's going to get looked at, analyzed, and used back home. So we really appreciated the challenge, and I think we were up for it, and we're happy to say we're complete with Dragon.
That's awesome, and you guys did a wonderful job. So your plans for tomorrow in the undock activities is on board. We do have a couple of go-backs for you this evening. The first one, as far as the VOK temp stow location, where you have it stowed overnight is just fine. The intent of the restow note originally was just to put it in the Node 2 Deck 3 location as a temp stow location, because you will have to access that equipment tomorrow. We will work with our specialists to find a permanent location and how we want to permanently restow these after your activities are completed tomorrow. How copy?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds good.
This is Mission Control Houston again. That was playback from yesterday, the daily planning conference. This happens at the beginning and the end of the crew's days when they have a chance to talk with the different ground teams about the day's schedule and talk about any questions that either the crews or the ground teams may have. But that was Capcom Kathy Bolt passing along some congratulations and thanks to the crew for all the work that they've done with Dragon and all the different cargo operations that they've had to do during a very busy time aboard the orbiting complex. The robotics officer here in Mission Control is just notified Flight Director Ron Spencer they're getting ready to continue the movement of the arm to get Dragon into the release position. This will be about a 15-minute maneuver to get it out there and get it outstretched away from the station and set up for this morning's release, which will take place at 8:26 a.m. Central Time, 9:26 a.m. Eastern. Of course, if this crew works as they usually do, sometimes these things take place a little bit earlier, but they do need to hit this pretty close to the targeted time because of the different lighting constraints that they need to have to see Dragon actually move away from the station. So it is timed pretty specifically, but we'll monitor the crew's progress once they get ready to go. But again, this is going to be a ground commanded maneuver to move the arm away from the station with Dragon on the end of it. And then the crew will take over at that point with Aki Hoshide and Sonny Williams down in the cupola, which is that sort of bay 360-degree window of the space station. It's got 7 different windows they can look out of. There's a robotics workstation that is down in there where they can control the arm, and that is where they will be with Aki Hoshide taking the lead and Sonny Williams backing him up. There's a second robotic workstation in the Destiny laboratory that is always up and running anytime we have these operations as sort of a hot backup in case the one in the cupola goes down. They can move to that one in the Destiny laboratory pretty quickly. Here's a look at the robotics workstation. You get a sense of what the crew can take a look at and what they can operate. There's a simple laptop there and different views of the cameras outside the station so they can see what they're working with. You see the crew command panel down there at the bottom right-hand side with the Dragon logo on it. That has some simple buttons that they can use to send a signal to Dragon if they need to. Dragon basically talks with the space station with the COTS UHF communication unit, or the Cuckoo, that is mounted in one of the racks there. Of course, that was tested out as part of NASA's COTS program, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Program, which was the original home of SpaceX as well as Orbital Sciences, as these two companies have worked to build and test these two cargo craft. Obviously, SpaceX with its Falcon 9 rocket and its Dragon spacecraft, and Orbital Sciences, which is getting ready to fly its first series of test flights coming up toward the end of the year and early part of next year, with its Antares rocket and Cygnus cargo craft. Of course, the biggest difference between Cygnus and Dragon is that Cygnus is designed to burn up upon reentry, so that there's a lot of trash that can be put inside there and disposed of, just like the Progress and the ATV and the HTV. But Dragon getting ready to demonstrate one of its biggest benefits, which is the return of cargo coming up at the end of this mission. Dragon and the space station now flying over Mongolia. Their altitude is 260 miles. They're beginning a pass down to the southeast over parts of Indonesia and then just to the east of Australia. And then they'll come back up over South America again. But the team has sent the ground commands to continue to get Dragon set up for the release. It's about a 15-minute maneuver to get the arm into position. But the robotics officer here in Mission Control is in the process of working with her team to get these commands sent to the arm. And the crew is monitoring the progress and also working on some of their other daily activities at the same time. And once again, Sonny Williams, Aki Hoshide will be moving to the cupola here momentarily to get ready for their part of today's process, which is actually the release of it, which will take place at 8:26 a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston. Again, the Dragon spacecraft is currently on the end of the station's arm, still grappled. The robotics officer here in Mission Control and her team are sending commands to the station's arm to extend itself out to get Dragon into the release position, which is roughly 30 feet away from the International Space Station. This is basically the same spot at which it was grappled back about 18 days ago.
Station Houston on 2 for Aki.
CJ, I think you read my mind.
Yep, Robo's complete with the maneuver, and we're ready for step 1 only of 1.320.
Okay, 1.320, step 1 only in work.
Thanks, Aki. We want to thank the crew for those views out the Node 2 CBM. That was really enjoyable to watch all that.
Awesome.
And Aki, just to clarify, in the very first thing in step 1, the hot backup is configured for MSS.
Okay, copy that very much.
This is Mission Control Houston, just to confirm the maneuver of the station's arm has been completed. So Dragon is pretty much at the release point. The ground team here has confirmed with the crew just a few minutes ago that both robotic workstations are up and running as expected. They're ready to do their job. The crew, Aki Hoshide and Sonny Williams, Aki being the lead person for this, will be moving down to the cupola workstation here shortly and getting ready to release Dragon coming up around 8:26 a.m. Central Time. There's a shot of where they're going to be working. And you get a sense of exactly how tight the quarters are there. Both of them can fit in there comfortably with the laptop there so they can monitor the timeline and what they're expected to do and the procedures. And they've got different monitors there, as well as the joystick that controls the station's arm. And there at the bottom right-hand side is the crew command panel, where they can actually send commands to Dragon, along with the ground teams in Hawthorne, California, who, of course, will be watching over these activities coming up over the next hour or so. There's a live look at the team there in Hawthorne, California. That control center there is on the same floor where this Dragon was born. One of the more unique aspects of SpaceX and its processes is that they actually build and test the spacecraft there at the same spot where their mission control center is, so this team can literally turn around and look out some glass windows and see the factory floor where this Dragon and the subsequent ones are being built. So the release time, 8:26 a.m. Central Time today. Dragon will have a series of burns, the first of which will take place at 8:27 to begin the process of backing it away from the orbiting complex. The second burn is at 8:29. There will be a yaw maneuver at 8:35 and another departure burn at 8:36. Dragon will cross over the keep-out sphere, which is an imaginary circle around the station at 8:36, the same time as that departure burn. It'll have a reduction of its apogee, which is the highest point of its orbit, at 9:22. And then the deorbit burn several hours later, 1:28 p.m. Central Time. The trunk, which is the bottom portion of the International Space Station, will be, of the Dragon spacecraft, will be separated at 1:41 p.m. Central Time. Entry interface at 1:43. The drogue chutes will be deployed from Dragon at 2:11, and the main chute just a minute later at 2:12, with splashdown at 2:20. This is a live view from Dragon looking up at the International Space Station, and you saw PMA-2, the pressurized mating adapter number 2, sticking out there from the Harmony node. The SpaceX team currently sending commands up to Dragon to set up the inertial measurement units, which is part of Dragon's guidance and navigation system.
Houston Station on 2 for SSRMS. Step 1 is complete.
Okay, looks good, Aki. We're following along. Thanks.
Houston Station on 2, are we ready for SSRMS Dragon release prep?
Negative, Sonny. We'll stand by and we'll call you back when we are ready.
Okay, copy. Standing by.
You can see the first traces of sunlight there on the Earth's limb as Dragon and the space station fly 259 miles above the South Pacific Ocean. They're just to the east of New Zealand, about to begin a southwest to northeast pass over the Pacific. They're going to be crossing over parts of South America, up over the Atlantic, and then over what looks like France and parts of Europe before crossing over Asia, parts of India, and then back over the parts of Indonesia and Australia. You can see a mark there on the map, right there, sort of to the north and northeast of India. That indicates where we should be in terms of Dragon release at 8:26 a.m. Central Time, but of course that point could move a little bit just depending on what time they do this. But right now we're about an hour and a couple minutes away from the release of the spacecraft from the space station's arm.
Station Houston on 2 for Sunny.
Go ahead, CJ.
Just, I don't want you hanging too close. It's the 1.602 procedure. We're not looking for you to perform that step 1 until around 1310, and I'm going to call you back when we're really ready.
Okay, 1310. All right, got it. I'll be ready for that.
That's a slight adjustment to what you might be seeing on OSTPV.
Exactly. Okay, thanks.
There is sunrise above the South Pacific Ocean with SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft there on the end of the station's robotic arm. These two teams are getting ready to say farewell to Dragon coming up in about an hour. It could happen a few minutes early if the crew and the ground teams are happy with their progress on the timeline, but we'll stand by for that. The Expedition 33 crew, specifically Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshide, will take over arm operations from this point on. They're going to be working down in the cupola at the robotics workstation there where they can control this robotic arm that you see there attached to the station and Dragon. They will send some commands to release the snares that currently are holding Dragon tight to the arm. And then they will back the arm away from Dragon as it flies in formation with the space station. A minute after the release, Dragon will fire its thrusters to begin what is known as departure burn number 1. There's a second burn at 8:29, and then a third one at 8:36. At that point, Dragon will cross what is called the keep-out sphere. This is an imaginary circle around the International Space Station that spacecraft have to keep outside of. And then Dragon will continue to open up the distance between itself and the orbiting complex. Here's a look at sort of the path that Dragon will be flying. It is currently 10 meters or about 30 feet away from the station. That is where it will be released. And it will continue on past that keep-out sphere, which is 200 meters or about 600 feet away from the station. And then it will continue on toward its deorbit burn, which will take place at 1:28 p.m. Central Time today, with a splashdown at 2:20.
Houston Station on 2 for Dragon.
Go ahead.
CJ, just wondered if you have an estimated window for release. And CJ,
Aki,
just to be clear, that's just for our SA.
We're getting you the exact time.
Okay.
Hang on.
Copy.
Okay, Aki, the window we're targeting is 1326 to 1347.
And Houston back with you on 2. Copy 1326 to 1347. And I understand that it will be during night pass.
Right, that's correct, Aki.
Okay. If you can throw all the lights you have, that will be great.
And Aki, the lights are as good as they're going to get. They're all turned on.
Okay. And yo.
Aki Hoshide there on board the International Space Station talking with CJ Sturko, the Capcom here inside Mission Control. Aki's going to be the main driver of the arm to get ready to release Dragon coming up at 8:26 a.m. Central Time. He was just verifying the windows in which they are go to release it. That first one, as you heard about, is going to be in the dark, which is very similar to what was done during the actual capture of Dragon. But they're trained to do this. They're getting some lights turned on outside the space station so the crew can see the vehicle. It is currently about 30 feet away from the space station and awaiting this release period coming up in less than an hour. Again, the release targeted for 8:26 a.m. Central Time, 9:26 a.m. Eastern Time. The two vehicles should be just to the north of India whenever that takes place, but of course it could happen a little bit on either side of that 8:26 time hack. This is a live view of the workstation that the crew is going to be working at with Aki Hoshide and Sonny Williams at the controls of the arm. This is sort of an over-the-shoulder look at what they're seeing. That green, what looks like home plate in baseball, sort of, is the box in which Dragon would need to stay whenever it was approaching the station back about a week and a half ago. But they will use this same display to take a look at the spacecraft as they release it, and it backs away from the station. Of course, they have a crew command panel there that they can send commands to in case they would have to send an abort signal or something. But they're going to be watching this, and we're going to be watching along with them as this release activity gets picked up here over the next several minutes. Again, release time, 8:26 a.m. Central Time. Dragon and the space station are currently 264 miles above the Pacific Ocean. They're approaching the western edge of South America, so we should see the coastline approaching here shortly. They're both traveling 17,500 miles an hour, which is 25 times the speed of sound. But both the teams in Houston and in Hawthorne, California are just going through their final procedures and working with the crew, getting ready for this release time coming up at 8:26 a.m. Central Time, about 45 minutes from now. Space station and Dragon now 263 miles above South America, passing over Bolivia. Heading up toward the northeast. Things are fairly quiet right now, but they're about to get pretty busy in the next several minutes. The ground teams are continuing to work through their procedures to make sure that everything is set up for the crew to release Dragon. Our release time still scheduled for 8:26 a.m. Central Time. There's talk that may happen just a few minutes early if the crew is ready to go, but we're still targeting an on-time release at 8:26 a.m. until we hear otherwise. But Dragon is in the release position, about 30 feet away from the station. Everything is green. Both the teams, before we came on the air, did their go, no-go polls for unberth and release. Everybody was go on both the SpaceX and NASA side. So the crew is just standing by, working inside the cupola and getting ready to let Dragon go.